Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Vern Moses. Welcome to our show. Again, I'd like to remind you to take this opportunity to run and get a pencil and a paper in case you'd like to take notes. Also, we will be giving you a number later on in the show that you can call if you'd like to receive an audio cassette of our program. Vern, last week we were talking about some very interesting ideas for accessing the subconscious mind. And as you had mentioned in an earlier show, our mind is actually a trichotomous mind. We have a conscience, a subconscious, and a conscious mind. And that we need to access our subconscious mind in order to be more powerful and effective in accomplishing our goals. And we were talking about confirmations as opposed to affirmations. And this week you said you had some more exciting material to cover for us.
Yeah, I kept last week's notes, if I can just make a quick review for someone who just dropped in this week. We were talking about verbally and visually stroking our genie lamp, which is essentially a metaphor for the subconscious mind. And we talked about auto-conditioning, affirmations, which is a first-party singular commentary. And we talked about I can, I will, and I am in their proper place, change that to we for more strength. And then we talked about confirmations and how we can make a confirmation tape if indeed soliciting our friends and loved ones doesn't seem to work. It should, but sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
One thing I wanted to throw in on top of the verbal techniques is proclamations. This is another thing that's too seldom brought up. I've read a lot of information on this in the past, heard a lot of discourses, but typically they don't talk about confirmations. I happened upon it purely by accident. Some years ago, I came by for lunch at dinner, and my wife volunteered to make a sandwich, which was unusual, and suggested that I sit down and read the local magazine, and I picked it up, and I was paging through it, and I came upon an article about Vern Moses, and it was startling because I didn't anticipate it. And as I read it, it was a complimentary article.
Yes.
And I really felt a warm glow from that. And I figured, whoa, this may be another way to get through to the subconscious mind. And then I didn't think too much more about it. Several months later, I was visiting an office in Austin, Texas. And the manager there asked me if I would favor him by excusing someone who's in the office. I was firing them, getting rid of them.
Oh, I see.
And I said, sure, I don't have any trouble doing that. Because typically if people aren't really making it, well, they probably need to move on and be happier anyway. This girl was given an appointment. And as she walked across the threshold into the office, she started to cry. And she said, I know why I'm here. Please don't do this. And I said, well, I don't understand. What do you think we're doing? She said, well, you're going to fire me. And I said, well, we can't fire you. You're an independent contractor. And she says, well, despite the language, I know that you're going to ask me to leave, and I really don't want to. And we sat and talked, and I was in a spot where I'd committed to getting rid of her, and here she was winning me over.
You to stay. Yeah.
And I remembered the magazine article. It came back to me, and I figured maybe the affirmations and confirmations will not work, but I'm going to suggest this. And so what I suggested she do was to sit with me and write a proclamation. And what that is a third-party commentary.
So not I am,
right.
Or I can't, but...
Or, nor you are, but about this girl, Charlene.
They are.
Yeah. No, you, Charlene, her name was, Harrington, Miss Harrington, Charlene Harrington. Some friends or acquaintances called her Charlie, she and her. In other words, it's third-party pronouns that you're reading about yourself in that different perspective. And I thought, this may really be a help. Now, what I've done for this particular show was to work up a proclamation. This is a sample. And if people would like to call in, why, we'll make an effort to send them this, and then they can adapt it to their own need.
Wonderful.
But a proclamation, in order to certify this, would read something like this. I call this about Fran future. Now, Fran can be androgynous, could be Francis or Francis, okay?
Right.
This is about Fran future. As the founder and director of Achievement Seekers Incorporated, Fran Future manages to balance a variety of tasks that all lead toward making a favorable difference in people's lives. By compartmentalizing her time into brief, manageable projects, she is able, or he, is able to devote purposeful, predetermined, and planned portions of each day to prospecting, invitationals, performances, writing, and the coaching and consulting of both clients and staff. Fran's dedicated persistence is constantly stimulated by the response she enjoys from a high percentage of participants, and the certainty that every effort practice is in concert with her purpose, or his purpose. The production and publishing of The Seekers, a television series, her personal appearances, a book, audio and video cassettes, and the dramatic results they can produce are among Ms. Future's primary pursuits. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, it's a third-party commentary about her. In this case with Charlene, I had suggested that she take this and read it as frequently as she could, and each time to make a mark. Okay, now this is one time, second time, third time, fourth time, fifth, and to cover this area with marks. Once that was, covered, then to upgrade, rephrase, reproduce this, and continue. Well, she did it, and I didn't think any more about it, or at least she agreed to do it. Didn't think anything more about it, and about 4 months later, I was occasioned to go back to that same office again, and there was a promotion party. I was bringing in a new manager, and there was a lot of things happening, and I noticed one of the people was being promoted to staff advisor, and she looked familiar, and all of a sudden it dawned on me who it was. It was Charlene Harrington.
Really?
And, I mean, dramatically different. And there were tears that night from a lot of people, including Charlene, and I was pretty thick-throated myself. I left the city, and frankly, I had 35 offices working, so there wasn't a lot of time to focus on one person like that. 8 years later, Gina, I got a letter from Charlene. I was in Pennsylvania at the time. And she said that she had been doing these proclamations consistently day after day, that she was now a practicing radiologist, that she was about to be married to a young intern, medical fellow, and that life was just wonderful, and she attributed it to the proclamations, and that she would inevitably continue them the rest of her life. I felt pretty good about that, and since then I've talked a lot about this. And what I'm contending is that it's a third passageway that seldom is addressed through to that subconscious mind, a way of conditioning and conditioning and conditioning it, wearing a new path. I was thinking about this today when I knew I was going to talk about this. Oftentimes the mind has been compared to a computer. In fact, I was going to bring a keyboard along with me and say that actually we're programming our mind all the time just like a computer. But then it dawned on me for the first time that it's not exactly like a computer, because I had a mishap this morning on my computer where I wiped out a whole screen.
I think we've all had that happen.
Yeah, I had no idea where it was. And yet I knew it hadn't been erased. You know what I mean? In other words,
But just how do I access it?
yeah, so I shut her down and I brought it back, and it hadn't been erased. However, can I delete if I choose to? Yes. I can, screen that thing down and delete, and nobody will find it.
Right.
The brain's not that way. In other words, we have no delete in the human mind. There is no erasure, and that's the challenge. What we have to do is to replace pattern thinking with new thoughts over and over again in order to create a new pathway. As a matter of fact, when I was thinking about it, I came up with an analogy similar to one that I've used before. I'm going to set this over here, because I want to come back now to it. It's kind of like we live near a lake. This is a lake, okay? And we have a cabin, we'll say it's right about here. Okay? And yet, rather than walking to the lake this way, there's a little pathway from this part of the cabin over in this direction. There's a pathway. And then we have to walk a further distance here to get down to the lake.
Right.
And we've been doing that time and time again. And one day someone said, how come we're walking along this path instead of walking this path?
Right.
Well, first of all, there's no path. That's one reason. But why is it this way? And then someone notices the fact that there's an old foundation here. There used to be a building there. And what these people did was take the shortest route to the lake. Okay? And
Right.
what these people started doing was taking the shortest way to the clearest path. Follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because And they keep doing this now because it's well worn. Now those stickers are gone, and little pieces of glass and pop tops and scorpions are out of there. You know what I mean? So it's a clear pathway. However, it's kind of ludicrous when the lake is this close.
Right.
And so what's it going to be like to walk this direction for a while? Well, it's going to be rough. Stones and, like I say, cockleburrs and snakes and one thing and another. But if we keep walking that way, that's going to get clear.
Then you'll have a short,
Okay.
clear path.
This path will grow over.
Right.
There will always be some evidence that the path was there, but yet it won't be the way we'll choose to go. And the mind is much that way. In other words, there's no erasure, but through affirmations and confirmations and proclamations, we can create a new pathway, gives us more immediate results. Does that make, understand? That
So
makes
we're really
sense?
changing our thinking patterns to give us quicker and more effective
Right.
results in the things that we want to accomplish.
Now, we've got to do this on purpose. We got to do it consciously, predeterminedly, because if we just let the mind go, it's going to go this way. There's a subconscious mind, being a survival mechanism, is going to take the easiest pathway.
The other thing that occurs to me is we need to make sure that we know really where it is that we want to go, so that the path is going along the correct. Maybe we don't even want to go to the lake anymore.
Exactly, that's true too. And this guy, I can't imagine not wanting to go there, but I can see what you're saying. You remember some weeks ago I wrote this, Who Am I?
Yes.
There was a phrase in there. It said, I've been in charge of your life and body for a long time. And for me to diminish or relinquish my power over you is going to take some techniques and actions on your part that you evidently don't know about or haven't bothered to exercise. This is what the subconscious was talking about. In other words, these are techniques that we haven't bothered to exercise or we just didn't know about. Now that you know about them, you either choose to exercise them or you don't. Either way, it has to be 100% okay. But if you want different and better results, this is one absolute way to assure that you'll get them. You'd better get serious, the subconscious says, and specific. Otherwise, I'm just not going to be bothered. And though, so far as I'm concerned, everything is just as it should be right now. But it's up to you. And the you in this case is your conscious mind, the one that can see and realize that things can be better and that we can be better. And I don't think we should ever content ourselves. You know, I heard some time ago that most things in nature reach their destiny. In other words, an acorn becomes an oak, a puppy becomes a dog, a kitty becomes a cat, you know?
Right.
But we never reach our potential. In other words, we never fulfill it. In other words, there's always something else that we could do, accomplish, or whatever. You have to know that with the capacity that we have in our mind, anything that has ever been done by anybody can be matched by us. Maybe we won't be as great as the greatest, but we can get real good at anything and everything, so long as it's within the law. As long as it's within the law. Now, there is more.
I'm sorry, Bern, could you repeat that? That was such a profound statement, truly.
I forgot what I said. No. In other words,
anything that someone else has accomplished, we can also accomplish.
Right.
But so often we limit ourselves and we say, well, I could never do that. I don't have whatever talents or qualities or abilities they have.
And that's all that it takes. Just that little phrase can shut you down, and your subconscious goes, yeah, I'm not going to be challenged. I'm not going to be threatened. I'm not going to die. You know what I mean? I can live forever this way. It won't, but it doesn't know that. See, we have to remember that that subconscious mind is indolent and ignorant and shut off from the world. It can't see, hear, feel, smell, or taste. It's incredible. It's totally dependent upon the conscious mind. And if we don't remain conscious, then this indolent, ignorant, reptilian form actually can diminish everything that we otherwise could be. Yes, anything that anyone has ever done, we can do. But we always got to remember it's got to be within the law. See, all of my kind of business career, I've heard that you can do anything you want to do, be anything you want to be.
As long as it's legal, moral, and ethical.
Yeah, and saying that's not true. There's a lot of things, like for example, at the risk of being challenged, I doubt, no matter how badly you want to, you will ever play for the NBA, the National Basketball Association, okay? Because there are dynamics involved here involving the law of physics.
Right.
For example, gravity. How tall are you, Gina? You know?
Well, I'm not as tall as
those guys, they're 6'7", 6'8", and they can jump.
Right.
There's no way you're going to compete with that. They weigh 250, 60, 70 pounds. Okay, you probably weigh 105. I'm trying to be kind here. No. Anyway, yeah, they can run harder and hit harder than we can, and chances are you're never going to play for the NBA, no matter how much you want to. Follow what I'm saying? It's got to be within the law.
Right.
So there's gravity, cause and effect, equal and opposite reaction. All those things have to be taken into consideration. But after that's considered, there are no barriers. A lot of people say, gee, I would give anything to be able to play the piano like that. No, probably not. Because that person who plays the piano that way has been doing that for
They gave a
long
lot.
time. They gave a lot, yeah. Those are choices that we make. But we always got to know and celebrate the fact that we have the choice. That's terribly important. Now, just as powerful as the verbal techniques
Yes.
on our subconscious, I believe that probably even more powerful are the visual techniques.
Really?
And those the imagination. There's a Dr. Mark Victor Hansen years ago coined the phrase Imagineering. In other words, engineering a future with your imagination. And those, if you can't see it, it's hard to believe it. It has to conjure up in your mind. There has to be a clear, vivid picture. Now, how capable are we in that area? If it's unpracticed, not to. We have a tendency that when we go into the future to worry, to wonder, to wish, and to want, there is a thing called telesthesia that is has a verbal impact on the subconscious mind. Telesthesia. It's a pretty word, and it's in the dictionary. I didn't make it up. But telesthesia. And in order to identify telesthesia, we have to talk about nostalgia. In other words, if I say the word nostalgia, does your mind go forward or backward?
Backward.
And to the good, the warm, and the fuzzy, or the hurtful, spiteful, painful
warm
things?
and fuzzy.
Good, warm, and
Yes.
fuzzy. And how vivid can a nostalgic experience be?
Extremely.
Yes. I mean,
You can
sometimes...
conjure up emotions and
Yes.
smells and flavors and the whole experience.
Exactly.
Yes.
Telesthesia is nostalgia for the future. Because we have the capacity to go ahead a month, a quarter, a year, or 5, and bask and celebrate in what is. In other words, the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a real situation and a synthetic one. And so as you go forward in your mind and have these experiences, it kind of accommodates it. It begins to adapt to that's the way it should be. And so what we're saying is, in order to make telesthesia as effective as it might be, say if you want a new car, what you need to do is not only get a picture of the car and put it on the refrigerator, which is a common practice, you've heard that
Right,
before,
right.
but to go and drive the car and get acutely aware of the sensory experiences.
How it smells.
How it smells,
How
the
the engine
leather,
sounds.
how the engine sounds, the door sounds when it's closing, the feel of it as it moves forward, the sound of the windshield wipers, everything you can capture that stimulates the senses, try to remember them. And then, in your mind's eye, as frequently as you can, go forward and drive that car. And I tell you, it'll accelerate. It'll accelerate the acquisition of it. There is no way that it cannot. One of the ways, too, that this was really impacted in our society was the Russians pioneering in this area. There's a word, anthropomaximology. Fun word. Let me say it again so our listeners can get a real handle on it. Anthropomaximology. It's the study of the maximization of the anthropoid. And so what this is, it's a fairly common thing, but it's using all of the capacities to reach our excellence. Kind of a fun concept. You can spend a lot of time in the future if you want to. When you go to bed at night, when you wake up in the morning, when you're driving down the highway, to get out there and to really celebrate. And this thing has an effect. I have seen so many evidences of this working in conjunction with the verbal affirmations that really shot people forward in a lot of areas of their life.
Well, it seems to me we don't have a lot of power in our life if we're always spending time in the past.
That's
But that we
exactly
need
right.
to be spending as much time in the future creating it
Yes.
as we can.
Do you have anything at all that you would like to ask or add to this?
Actually, if you don't mind, you were talking about cars, and a friend of mine had a strong desire to have a Ferrari. And he'd put the picture of the Ferrari up on his fridge. And actually, I'm sorry, he wanted a Testarossa. And he'd put the picture up on his fridge. And every day he would read the article about this car and everything. And he reached his goal, and so he went to buy the car, and they didn't have the car that he wanted in stock, and they said, we certainly don't have it in that color. And so he said, well, then I'll fly to LA and get the car. And he went to LA, and they said, yeah, we have the car you want, and we have it in the color you want, but there's a problem. This car was a demo, or was driven, but it wasn't actually driven. Actually what happened was it was used as a special car in the article for Road and Track magazine, and that was the exact car that he had on his fridge. So not only did he get a car like the car he wanted, he got the exact car that he had dreamed and thought and wanted so much for that entire year in that special color, and I thought that was interesting.
That's fascinating. Yeah. There's all kinds of stories like that.
Right.
I have a friend of mine in Dallas, Texas, who built this beautiful home, and there was some nuances in the construction of the home that challenged the architects, and with his not being an architect, was able to define how that should be made. It was so vivid in his mind. He'd been practicing and examining this for a long, long time. Then after it was built, he had in his mind's eye two tables on the inner door in the foyer of the home, and he wanted eagles, golden eagles, holding a marble top, and he couldn't find them, but he kept imagining them and focusing on them. And one day he was reading a foreign magazine. It was a German magazine, and in there he spotted them. In other words, it was a pair. It came from the Reich, Third Reich, and in spite of its history, I mean, it's exactly what he wanted. So he flew to Germany and acquired them and got them so he could bring them back home, and there they sit. But it's just focusing on that thing long enough, and like you say, you find that magic there that's somewhere.
Right.
Now, I don't think that anything happens outside that causes it, but you get so acutely aware of your world that he was looking through the magazine.
Out of any,
exactly.
Right.
He was looking for it. There's no question. There is one thing we have to be conscious of, though, that the results are going to depend upon some specifics.
Right.
It's the frequency that you do this with. In other words, you can't... I've talked to people, for example, after a seminar, and I'd call them and say, how you doing with the affirmations? And it's, oh, good, good. And I said, well, what one did you select? And they really not sure. The work's not done yet.
Right.
And then I said, well, how many times are you saying that a day? He said, oh, a bunch. And I said, well, how many times would you think? He said, oh, 30, 40 times. 30 or 40 times. That's interesting. The mind thinks 50,000 thoughts a day. Therefore, what did you think the other 49,970 times? Is it possible that you should have been snapping some rubber bands? You know, I mean, the fact that you were...
Maybe you were thinking more, maybe 60 or 70 times or 100 times a day you were thinking the opposite.
Exactly,
negative.
exactly. Or something entirely different that didn't have anything to do with what your really intention was. So what I'm saying is you got to keep the mind really focused. So frequency is an important key. The next thing is intensity. It can't be a passive exercise. I mean, it's got to be really intense. I mean, and make things just as vivid.
Being focused.
And also, it's a matter of duration. You know, it's how long can you do it without interruption? It's practicing on making those affirmations and imagineering in lengthy periods of time, getting really, really focused. And then, of course, the vividness with which you do it. All those things have to be considered as to the results that you're going to get. You know, it's tragic, but the mediocre, the minor things will come to us pretty easily. If we don't challenge the subconscious, it quickly adapts to anything. You know, I mean, it's if it conforms to what's going on, the mind seems to be settle for that very quickly. It's the excellence that has to be reached for.
Perhaps it's because we're confronted with mediocre.
Oh, exactly.
So often that's really what is maybe we're getting.
At the risk
as
of being
affirmation.
unkind, at the risk of being unkind and misunderstood, I mean, most of us exist in a milling mass of mediocrity.
Yeah.
People just getting by, doing, you know, what they need to do in order to survive, and it's not sufficient. And I need you to be as good as you can be, and you need to be as good as I can be, and we need this person that's watching us to be as good as they can be, and therefore we all benefit.
Yeah.
And that comes out of synergy. And that can really, really make it work. I do have a couple of things here that I will send out, by the way. Be happy to send this out to someone who would like to get it, but there's some comments on affirmations.
Great.
And
perhaps we could get a phone number too, Bern.
yes, I'm going to have to give them a phone number. In fact, I'll give it to them now, then I'll read a couple of these, and then get back to the phone number again. It's 1-800-661 1-800-661-3490. 1-800-661-3490. Might catch me live, or you might get the voicemail, but either way, leave your name, address, phone number, and we'll get back in touch with you. We'll send a schedule as to when we're on. And by the way, we're on a lot of cities now, Gina.
That's
the show
wonderful.
is spreading out, and so
We'd like to welcome all our new viewers.
yeah,
It's great to have you.
If they'll call in this number, we'll send them a schedule of their city so that they can catch us when they want to. Getting back to this, once we really accept and believe that something is possible, it becomes probable. That's exciting.
Yes.
Yeah? Belief stimulates action, and we are suddenly on a path to expansion. These are little like aphorisms that I've written over the period of time. Each affirmation is a choice, an exercise of free will, and a commitment. Because every affirmation tends to be toward a commitment, all of which recognize the capacities that are ours, the authorities that must be accepted, and the responsibilities that have to be assumed. You can write your book of life instead of just reading it. Have we talked about that before?
I think that'd be a wonderful thing to talk about on our next show, Bern. I'm looking forward to that.
We're running down.
We're
here
running out of
very
time.
rapidly. Success doesn't come the way you think. It comes from the way you think. Sounds almost like the same thing, doesn't it?
Yes.
But it is different. And I'll close with this. Right thoughts for and toward the future are the best explanations or apologies for wrong ones in the past. The best evidence of regret for them that we can offer or the world receive. Gina, we should remind everybody, I guess, that my name is Bern, last name is
Moses,
and you're Gina Fitt, and you're wonderful.
Thank
I appreciate
you, Bern. I sure enjoy the time we spend together each week.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you, Bern.